Hi, welcome to this series, three-part series on Introduction to Equity-Centered Assessment. If for folks who don't know me, my name is Gavin Henning. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm professor of higher education here at NEC, and I direct our Doctor of Education programs as well as our Master of Science in Higher Education Administration programs. And so what I want to do is provide a series of short mini lectures related to equity-centered assessment. There's a link you can see on your screen to a bunch of resources. You can type that in and be able to pull up some useful resources to supplement some of the things I'm talking about. And in this first mini lecture, what I'd like to do is kind of provide a little bit of an overview of what equity-centered assessment is. So first of all, just to define some terms. So when I talk about diversity in this context, talk about the fact or quality of being different. So think about how do we have a diversity of people, thoughts, perspectives in the classroom. Inclusion, making sure we include everybody. This could be not only in the class itself, but in conversation and participation, discussion. Equity is an intention for fairness and justice, and social justice is actually partnering that intention with action to really create this equity. And the reason that we've been really talking about this is that assessment and diversity, equity, and inclusion have been separated. And typically when I've been talking about this, people think I mean the assessment of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, but it's not that at all. Really looking at this intersection between the two and thinking about how can we integrate diversity, equity, inclusion into assessment. Now, not all assessment's gonna have equity as part of it or as a focus, but how do we look at that center overlap between those two concepts? Part of the reason that we wanted to bring this up is that assessment doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's influenced by societal culture, geographic area, institutional context, and even the positionality of the person doing assessment and a lot more. And then there's an output of that. So not only to do the assessment itself, but there's a bigger impact on institutional effectiveness, student learning, and it can even change culture. And so to really think about assessment and do it in, I think, is the best way we can, we really need to think about what are those inputs that influence the process, and also think about how do we build equity intentionally into that. So why should we integrate equity beyond what I just talked about already? The first is that we see these 6-year graduation rates, these educational outcomes are very disparate by student population, by student demographics, as you can see on the graphic on the screen right now. But there are longer term impacts. So not only do we want to make sure all of our students are graduating at a similar rate, but there are bigger impacts. There's actually, according to some recent data from the National Center of Education Statistics, there's a 20,700 difference in the median salaries, annual salaries for folks with a bachelor's degree compared to a high school degree. Compounded over 10 years, it's $207,000 difference. And over a 40-year career, it's close to $1 million. And then think about just investing some of that, how that total difference could even be larger between those two groups. And so when we think about the educational attainment, there are huge individual benefits to having at least a bachelor's degree or at least some post-high school credential. But there are also some societal benefits. According to DeMa and their colleagues, people with a bachelor's degree are more likely to hold a job, more likely to be healthy. Because of that, they're less likely to be on public assistance. They're less likely to need public health options such as Medicare and Medicaid. They are more likely to vote. Because they're making more money, they're more likely to pay taxes. So there's a huge societal benefit to educational attainment. And so when we think about the outcomes, the educational attainment for all students leads to some individual benefits around wealth, but then also leads to some societal benefits. Now, even though this may be a new topic for a lot of folks, this work has been going on for a long time. The literature dates back to the 1930s with Reed Jackson and taking a look at what he called responsive evaluation, evaluating educational systems in the South. And over time, it's been a hot topic. Although there was a huge gap between 1935 and 1985, the different topic has come up in more nuanced ways, either so culturally competent evaluation, inclusive evaluation, multicultural evaluation. There's even culturally responsive evaluation, decolonizing assessment, bias-free assessment. So there's some shifts between assessment and evaluation. Continued with some critical assessment, social justice assessment, which is also called assessment for social justice, mindful assessment, culturally responsive assessment, which kind of mirrors culturally responsive evaluation, and then culturally relevant assessment, which is slightly different than culturally responsive assessment, anti-racist assessment, healing-centered assessment, and now I think we're at a point where we're kind of calling this equity-centered assessment. And like I said, it's been going on. The literature goes way back to the 1930s. It's fairly new within higher education assessment, probably started around 2017 with a paper from the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment around culturally responsive assessment. But it's been going on for a long, long time in the evaluation world. It's just the evaluation world hasn't really connected with the higher education world as much as it should. So there's some really important reasons why we should be thinking about equity and the assessment process, really trying to bring these two together. The work has been going on for a really long time, and the scholarship is nuanced and continuing to evolve. In the next mini lecture on equity-centered assessment, I'll talk a little bit about a framework that can be used to think about this kind of work, and then also provide some foundation for integrating this practice